Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Javon Harrington, back at you with another video. And today, we're starting a brand new series on our channel, that being What If Captain America Was in Jojo's Bizarre Adventures, Jojo's Bizarre Adventures, The First Avenger. This series is a crossover of the MCU Captain America First Avenger storyline, along with the second part in the JoJo's Bizarre Adventures franchise, that being Battle Tendencies, as both stories line up at around the same point in timelines, that being during the events of World War II. In this story, we see what happens when Captain America, that being Steve Rogers, comes into contact with none other than Joseph Joestar, descendant of Jonathan Joestar. We see how their adventures cross over with one another in this brand new multiversal series. Now, as far as how far I'm going to go, I am going to cover the events of Battle Tendencies along with Star Crusaders, but I don't plan on going beyond that unless it is asked of me by the fans later on as the series progresses. But anyway, how will Captain America do in this new surroundings, as he learns new and otherworldly abilities on top of the ones that he will already acquire, in the attempt to defeat not only the Pillar Men, but also stop the nefarious schemes of Hydra? Without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Our story begins in Brooklyn, New York, 1942, where a scrawny young man named Steve Rogers would be rejected once again as he tried to enlist in the army as World War II was underway. He walked the streets of New York along with his two friends, that being Sergeant James Buchanan Barnes, as well as their other longtime friend, that being Joseph Joestar. When Joseph moved with his grandmother, Irene, from London to New York, the three had formed a bond, a friendship, and they had gotten along with one another ever since. For the two well-built young boys, that being in Joseph and Bucky, they always made fun of Steve for being the scrawny of the bunch, but Steve always had the biggest heart of any of them. Steve desperately wanted to join the war efforts, and their friends encouraged him to look for other ways to try to help out. But for Steve, it was about trying to do no less than anyone else before him. As a result, their conversation would be overheard by a scientist, Dr. Abraham Erskine. As a result, Rogers would still be enlisted for the super soldier experiment, at which the United States were looking to create an army of super soldiers that could potentially help turn the tide of battle. Rogers would leave for camp in time, and he would eventually pass the doctor's test, allowing for him to be subjected to becoming the first super soldier, at which the process would actually be completed, and Steve Rogers would be transformed from his scrawny, almost malnourished state into being that of a superhuman. However, sadly, the Doctor would still be assassinated by a rogue Hydra agent in the process. With only one super soldier to use at their disposal, Rogers would not be enlisted into the army, but instead, he would be used for wartime propaganda, helping to sell bonds to the American public. Rogers would go on tour in various parts of the United States as well as in Europe, And while he was getting notoriety as the American face figure Captain America, Rogers still felt as though there was more that he could be doing for the war efforts. While taking a break and visiting the New York area for another show, he would stop and visit his old friend Joseph. While they were there, the two of them would seemingly be attacked by a strange being, someone that Joseph recognized as a man named Strazio. But he had been different than before. He bore fangs and his skin was very pale. The two would find themselves being attacked one night while Joseph was visiting Steve as he was wrapping up another show. Still dressed in his Captain America uniform along with the shield that he had been given, the two of them would move out of the way at the same time as the vampire-like being attacked them. Joseph, using his quick wits, or rather his cowardice, running away from the situation as Steve would chase behind him, the two of them being chased down by the strange vampire-like being. The two would work together to defeat the immortal foe. Eventually defeating him, they would learn of Joseph's dear old family friend, that being in Robert E.O. Speedwagon, having seemingly been killed or captured not too long ago. And Joseph, being worried for his safety, would want to go and rescue him by any means, looking to take a trip to Mexico. Steve, realizing the dangers of the situation, would ask Joseph if he could accompany him. Joseph thought that it was a bit too dangerous for Steve to get involved, but having seen how Steve was able to hold his own, and seeing that his power was above superhuman, he knew that at the very least he could take care of himself. Also for Steve, he wanted to do more in any type of effort that he could. In the end, selling bonds was something that anyone could do, and Joseph needed his help. With that, the two would make their way to Mexico, sneaking into a detention center where Speedwagon was being held by a subgroup of Nazis known as the Hydra Organization, a group that was working to aid not only in Adolf Hitler's world conquest, but also in the conquest of their true master, a man known only as the Red Skull. Joseph and Steve would make their way to save Speedwagon. However, in the process, a new and strange foe would awaken, a being that was known as a Pillar Man, an ancient humanoid species that had long since been dormant as they were affected by the power of sunlight. The man's name was Santana. This is where Steve would learn of Joseph's own hidden abilities. Using something known as Haman breathing, Joseph was able to utilize the power of sunlight to his disposal, and in doing so, it was the one weakness to the Pillar Men. The two would work in combination. However, the Pillar Man known as Santana would prove to be far more powerful than they could have possibly have hoped to deal with. A power so dangerous that even for both sides, that being Joseph and Steve, as well as the Hydra agents and their leading commander, Rudolf von Stroheim, they would have no choice but to work together, the three sides coming as one in an attempt to defeat the Pillar Man. Although it seemed as though Rudolf had seemingly been killed in the process, the combined efforts of both Joseph and Steve would prove to be invaluable, Steve using his shield to reflect sunlight from Joseph to defeat the Pillar Man and turn him back into stone, tricking and defeating him once and for all. Once they had saved Speedwagon, the group would travel to Rome in Italy, as there was someone there that they could meet. They would be informed by Speedwagon of why he was in Mexico in the first place, as he had stated that they had discovered the Pillar Man, and they were attempting to destroy them before they could awaken. However, their plans had now gone awry, and it seemed as though the Pillar Man, a threat to all mankind, was seemingly on the rise once more. And even worse, the enemy nations, that being the Nazi Party, along with Hydra, were seemingly trying to get their hands on the power of the Pillarmen. If they were able to do that, then there was no telling what type of world conquest they would be able to enact. While they were in Rome, Speedwagon would introduce both Joseph and Steve to Cesare Zeppeli, a man who was also trained in Haman and was also the descendant of both Mario Zeppeli as well as his grandfather, Will Zeppeli, the one of whom had trained Joseph's grandfather, Jonathan. The group would be at odds at first, mainly between Cesar and Joseph, as they didn't quite get along as well, although Steve would prove to be the voice of reason, as their main focus was trying to stop Hydra and the Nazis at all costs from gaining this new form of power. Having no choice but to work together, they would make their way trying to find the resting place of the Pillarmen. In the process, the three would end up running into various Hydra agents who were also searching for the secret power as well. But there was also another group who was hot on their trails as well. They would come into contact with none other than Agent Peggy Carter, a member of the British military who was working alongside with members of the United States. And surprisingly enough, among the group that she had taken with her to go after the Hydra agents, Rogers would be surprised to meet his longtime friend in Bucky Barnes, as he had been selected to help out with the efforts as well, being noted for his shooting skills and being an excellent sniper. The groups now conjoining together, Peggy would learn more from Joseph and Cesar about the Pillarmen, as well as about their abilities in Haman. Believing that they could be assets, she would implore for the two of them, along with Steve, to help her out, as she could use all the strength that she could get if they were going to defeat Hydra once and for all. In the process, they would eventually come face to face with three of the Pillarmen, being unable to stop their resurrection. The three would be known as Kars, Wamu, and Esidices. Having the three awoken, they would attempt to take them down. However, their strength would be overwhelming for the group. Joseph, Steve, and Cesar each being pinned down. With the three Pillarmen who had known about the users of Haman from ancient times and believing that they had seemingly destroyed them all, they thought that it would be best to simply kill the two now before they could become a potential threat in the future. However, Joseph, being quick-witted and playing on the pride of one of the members of the Pillarmen, that being Wamu, he would convince him that it would be better to let him live and to become a more worthy opponent to be killed. However, Wamu and his comrade, Esidices, were not going to be tricked so easily. While they did have honor, at the same time, they weren't foolish enough to just play into the enemy's hands. They would each take a poison ring and place it in Joseph's throat and around his heart. This would give him only 33 days to live unless he could defeat them and take their antidotes respectively. This now put Peggy and her team in more of a bind than she was expecting, as they couldn't afford to lose Joseph, but at the same time, he clearly wasn't strong enough to face them the way he was now. Believing that they were going to need all the help that they could get, Cesar would suggest training under his master, a woman named Lisa. Joseph was a bit skeptical about this, as well as Steve, but seeing as how they didn't have much time or much options, they would have no choice but to seek out the master and train under her. Bucky Barnes would be recruited as well, and the four would be given permission by Peggy, as she was going to search out for any information that she could about Hydra or the Pillarmen. While she would take her group back to base, Joseph, Cesar, Steve, and Bucky would make their way to the Air Supplina Island off the coast of Venice. There, they would meet with the Haman master, Lisa. Taking one look at the group, she didn't think that they were anything worth training. However, as she closely examined each of the 4 boys, she could sense that there was something special about each of them. In their own way, they each had great amount of potential to become excellent Haman masters. And with the proper guidance, she felt she could definitely get them to shape. After all, in Joseph's case, he only had less than a month to get as strong as he possibly could. Because for him, failure was simply not an option. As they began their training in Haman, they would learn how it was used, the ability to focus sunlight energy through concentrated breathing. And it wasn't just in the matter of manipulating sun energy, but they could also use it to enhance various weapons. For example, with Joseph, he used his Haman energy to flow through his weapons, from his trusted Tommy gun to various ropes, as well as his trusted clackers. And for Caesar Zappelli, he was also capable of using his Haman through bubbles of soap. And with proper training, Bucky and Steve could be capable of doing the same. As she looked closer at Steve, she saw the shield that he bore on his arm, believing that his potential could be the greatest of all. But as our heroes underwent their Haman training, there were still other forces at work. The Pillarmen, as well as the forces of Hydra, they were not done in their search, for there was another artifact of which they prized over. It was known as the Red Aja Stone, and the one who was capable of controlling that could control the fate of humanity. This concludes Jojo's Bizarre Adventures, The First Avengers. What if Captain America was in Jojo's Bizarre Adventures? Part 1. If you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that's to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we continue Jujutsu Kaisen, Curse of Daishi, based on the Heroes of the Morphin Grid series, Part 3. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.